Airport employees of Reddit, what is the strangest, funniest, scariest thing that happened at your airport? I work avionics on F-22s in the Air Force. Most of the work is done outside. One day on mid-shift we get told to go inside, turn off the lights, and not look outside. Not knowing what the heck was going on, we obviously complied. Once everyone was inside, the big stadium lights that covered the entire airfield were turned off and all the entire airfield was dark. We heard low rumbling in the distance that was getting closer and rumors started flying. We were under attack. Aliens, you name it. Eventually we could hear 3 large planes fly very low overhead and be gone. After 15 more minutes we were given the go ahead to go back outside and back to work. To this day I still don't know what the heck happened. I would assume that it was a classified prototype they didn't want seen. Not an employee but a passenger. I got flagged for a random tar pat down and the agent asked me if I had any metal in my body, to which I said, I have an IUD. The agent freaks out and starts flagging other agents over. She musters all her calm and says please repeat that you have an IUD on you, to which I had to say no. An IUD, a copper intrauterine device, for birth control. She didn't know what an IUD was. I bet you'll remember now. Not nearly as funny but similar misunderstanding of IUD. Grandmother, you better start taking birth control if you don't want to get pregnant. Me, well, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but I got an IUD. Grandmother, shakes head unbelievable. Drinking and driving. I work at my local airport. I live on a tiny island and this airport is smaller than our library, and just last summer we had a hurricane looming down on us. Everyone is getting packed up to evacuate. We're renting cars like crazy to people fleeing and we're trying to get them out of the storm area. I was out checking on the cars we had and when I walked back up there was a man sitting on a bench out front, with an apocalyptic looking storm bearing down on us. Wind whipping everywhere, just soulfully playing the trombone. No idea where he came from or what he was doing but it was surreal, like something out of a David Lynch film. To clarify, this island is tiny, but it is also very close off the coast and has a bridge to the mainland. I'm pretty sure he was just doing his job. Worked at Perth Airport until recently. Most flights in Perth go to Bali and you see some right characters. Read, Bali Bogans. A Jetstar flight was delayed by 7 hours and a woman and her husband used the time to get absolutely s-faced. The woman fancied a cigarette and rather than go outside and go through security again, lit up in the middle of the duty free. My colleagues quickly tried to stop her, but she told them to frick off. Cue airport police. $10,000 fine and no flight to Bali. Should have listened to the staff. Worked for a summer as a skycap at an airport in Maine. A couple of the 9/11 hijackers came through that airport, and then to Logan, in Boston, which is where the hijacking took place. They chose this airport in Portland precisely because it was kinda podunk and no one would pay attention as much. A guy I worked with actually showed them to where the rental car place was because the way the airport was set up back then it was in this weird corner and people would ask for our help to find it constantly. Poor guy felt like he was in some way responsible. I'll bet 1,000 people who interacted, even just a little bit, with the hijackers felt like they were in some way responsible. I used to do cargo for Delta and British Airways. We ship a lot of dead people, a lot of animals, too. They actually sent me to LA to go to a class entirely on animal handling. Here's regulations and procedures for everything all the way up to elephants and whales and crap. Weirdest thing we ever got to actually ship was an alligator of some sort. A whale, on an airplane, flying. Pittsburgh International. 3 AM or so several years ago. Watched an older woman tumble down the up escalator. Every time she flipped over she yelled I'm okay like Philbert from Rocco's Modern Life. Flop, I'm okay. Flop, I'm okay. Flop, I'm okay. Rolled in place for maybe a minute before someone shut the thing off. That sounds hilariously painful. I worked at a corporate aircraft maintenance place, and we had a situation where this crazy woman somehow got out on the secured ramp area. By the time one of our line service guys saw her she had the main entry door open up on a Global XRS aircraft. When he pulled up she looked at him and asked if he could help her get her bags on board. When he told her he couldn't, she told him she was going to fly the plane to China and didn't want to be late. After that occurrence the security at our airport became insane. I have so many questions. Not me, but my father was regional manager of one of the rental car companies at the airport, and on 9/11 when all flights were grounded everyone needed rental cars and it was havoc. My father said the phone rang and he almost didn't answer because he was so busy. Turns out it was the company CEO and ordered him to hand out keys free, no cost, no documentation, as the situation was severe and all other major rental companies followed suit. Not necessarily strange, funny or scary, but it is one of the few stories he told me about the job as a kid that I always remember. One of my uncles was in the air on 9/11. He said they made an emergency landing in Dallas, and while everyone else stopped to call their family, he sprinted for the rental car and got one of the last ones. A school friend's father worked on passport control at Gatwick in the mid-80s. In those days passports were often handwritten and had spaces for things like distinguishing features. One day a young woman presented her passport to him, and he opened it and compared the photo, and then paused before saying, "This is a bit unusual." He showed her the open passport, which read in part, "Distinguishing features, Big T." She exclaimed, "My bloody brother, I'll kill him." LOL, that's pretty funny. Wait, what? Not me, but a friend. He used to work refueling planes. Most days during lunch he would sit in the airport and do some people watching. Anyway, a cart with a bunch of baggage rolls by and the bag on the end falls off without anyone noticing but him. After some time security is notified of the unknown bag. Taking all precautions, security bring in the bomb sniffing dog to check it out. The dog sniffs it for a second and then all of a sudden begins to hump the bag. This was all before 9/11. Airports employ falconers. The birds are used to keep other birds away from aircraft, because a bird in an engine can really mess up someone's day. So this falconer had come into the airport with his bird to grab a cup of coffee. He decided to try to impress some ladies by taking the hawk's hood off and doing a little demonstration. What he failed to notice was the starlings resting outside on a steel beam. Hawk flew after starlings, smoked the glass and broke its neck. Thousands of dollars worth of highly trained bird, gone. He killed his wingman. Most of the airport work is mundane, but you will get the odd passenger that leaves an impression on you. There was a group of people coming through for a business trip and their boss had never flown before. One of his employees came in and explained they told him he needed dental records for TSA and wanted us to play along. So the boss comes in and hands me his ID and an x-ray from his dentist to check in for his flight. Trying not to laugh, I show it to my co-worker who points at it and says, "Well, TSA might have an issue with that." Dude's face went white as a sheet until his employees busted up laughing. He got super red in the face and eventually started laughing at himself. Never let it be said that airports are humorless places. A 767 from our neighbors here on the ramp took a turn too sharp on the taxiway in winter and got stuck in the snow mud. It was stuck there for 36 hours while they brought in their ACMS guys from their main hub to try and get it out. Meanwhile, 80,000 plus lbs of Amazon orders and other stuff important enough to burn jet fuel to move just had to sit. I can't imagine what it cost them to recover it all in the plane. I can't imagine what it cost. Aviation in a nutshell. My father was in the US Air Force. They had a tech that worked on ejection seats. Decided to end his life. Left a suicide note in the plane. He activated the ejection seat inside the hangar. My dad was a facilities engineer and had to repair the various things his body cut through. That's the most dramatic way of committing suicide I've ever heard of. Not me, but a guy I once met. He works at the counter for a big local airline. There was a lady about mid to late 50s about to board with 4 big suitcases. This was a time when you normally could bring up to 2 suitcases or 23 kilograms. He notices this and tells the lady she would have to pay for the extra 2 suitcases. The lady nonchalantly says, "Oh, my husband is carrying those." He asks about her husband and again, completely relaxed and in a natural voice she points at the plane and answers that's him in the coffin. After that he apologizes and let the lady board. Think any employee'd let that slide? My parents worked in airports and told me this story that happened sometime in the late 70s. They notice a patch of purple on the marble floor near the check-in queue. Thinking someone has spilled their red wine on the floor, a cleaner comes over and clears it up. About half an hour later, There's another pool of purple. A different cleaner comes along, clears it up. Eventually the original cleaner comes back, notices the same pool he cleared up already is back. He doesn't know what's going on. He looks up. There's an air vent, dripping something. Maybe it's air conditioning coolant or something. He reports it to his supervisor. Nothing happens for a day or two. They just keep mopping up this coolant. Eventually they send an aircon tech into the roof. He comes back down the ladder, white as a sheet. It's a body. Turns out someone had tried to break past security by climbing through the air ducts. This is pre-Die Hard. Remember, so quite clever. Wasn't so clever was taking a wrong turn in the dark and falling 30 feet into a fan mechanism drop. Smoosh. I wonder what they were trying to do would have done if they hadn't died. My mother was on her way to work at YHZ in pre-board security. She called me to say she just saw a massive explosion. As I made my way to the fire depot, my pager went off, alerting us to a 747 cargo plane crashing just past the runway. It was easily in my top 3 craziest scenes to be on. My grandmother was a stewardess for Delta for decades. She was serving on a commercial flight to Moscow, Russia during the 80s when Russia-US relations weren't so groovy. During the flight, 2 Russian MiG fighter jets came up alongside the plane. Scared the heck out of everybody, including the crew. They thought that they were going to be shot down. After some confusion, it was announced that the MiGs were escorting the Delta flight as a sort of farewell salute to the Delta captain who was piloting his last flight. Wasn't funny in any way, but this guy had to bring the ugliest dog I have ever seen to the airport and send it to his ex-wife so that she could put it down. She hated him and the dog, but she had a better lawyer. Guy was a big burly dude fighting back tears the whole time and asked if he could take him out to play with him in the grass one more time. On the way back through Tsar from a class trip to Germany, one of my classmates got pulled aside from the group because he bought gummy bears in bulk from a Haribo store and they thought he was smuggling something in them. Dude just really liked gummies. I had a classmate get so many bottles of olive oil in Germany that he had to put them in other people's luggage to stay in the weight limit. Something about high schoolers in Germany, I guess. Worked at an airline over the summer as an intern. I was assisting in the check-in area and helping passengers who use the kiosks to check in. Now this was the time many airlines introduced basic economy and many people didn't know about the new baggage rules which won't let you bring on a carry-on bag, just one personal item. This family of 5 comes along returning home and they seem to know about the rule. Maybe they encountered it on the way here, but they all had a backpacks, a couple of them more than one actually. So I go and kindly remind them about the basic economy baggage rules and they snapped back at me and said they knew. So they had about 9 bags, all relatively small bags. So in order to save money on their checked bags, the father takes out a big roll of tape and just sits down in the check-in area taping their bags together so it'll only be one. Everyone looked at them, but it worked. I work the cargo ramp. We're at the very edge of the main runway, and there's a marshy area about 200 featuring from the end of the runway. One day we saw a pickup roll out on the service road near the marsh, and hear several shotgun blasts. A couple minutes later, the airport guys in the truck roll up and ask if anyone wants some free geese. One of our crew took 2 dead geese home and smoked them for us. Delicious. Apparently, the geese were just coming right back to that spot if they were forcibly relocated, so they had to be permanently removed. Geese are such buttholes. One time a couple of us were wing walking a 757 back from the gate while our ACMS guy drove the pushback. After the jet is backed up, we're supposed to detach the pushback vehicle from the tow bar, then detach the tow bar from the plane's landing gear, and reattach the tow bar to the pushback vehicle. That day, the 757's parking brake failed, and as we detached from the pushback, the plane started rolling toward us with the engines running. Looking up at a 100,000-pound vehicle that's already basically on top of me while the engines came toward me was quite the experience. The captain had to stand on his pedal brake to stop the plane rolling so we could finish and get clear. Both the other people with me immediately went out for a smoke. Worked at the airport in Melbourne, Florida. A family arrived from Spain for vacation. Apparently their travel agent screwed up the flight reservations. They were supposed to go to Melbourne, Australia. I later heard they made the most of it and ended up going to Disney, I think. Not an airport employee but my daddy's. I'm sure he's got many stories but my favorite is one I also experienced. We're in the Tsul line as a family, on our way to visit family across the country. The line is its regular slow self, but we're nearing the point where we have to take off our shoes and belts and whatnot. Suddenly, there's a commotion in front of us, where people pick us their bags after scanning. A woman has packed the following things into her carry-on and is refusing to hit R when they tell her she can't take them on. A full-size Costco double pack of peanut butter, a toaster, the kind that flings your toast in the air, a blender with blade. I'm sure there were other things too, but I have never forgotten those 3 things being slowly pulled out of her bag. Now I'm imagining a woman trying to hijack a plane using a plugged-in blender, like, slowly advancing on the cockpit, pausing intermittently to plug it into the next outlet. The pilot for one of our smaller planes requested de-ice. He's a very picky guy when it comes to spraying his plane, so he got out to inspect when he thought the crew was done. The de-ice truck was on the other side of the plane, and the crew didn't see him get out. They weren't done. He got soaked by hot orange glycol. Fortunately, it was indirect spray coming off the plane instead of directly from the nozzle at high pressure. The flight was delayed while he ran inside to change, swearing the whole way. My mom worked as a TSA agent for years. Most days were pretty calm and people are usually polite and understanding. The worst treatment she gets on a day-to-day occurrence are the occasional scoff and snobby attitude. One day though, people were in a really bad mood and she couldn't figure out why until this old lady came through. "Excuse me ma'am, but I think someone's dog might have relieved itself nearby." My mom said it would be taken care of soon enough and checked the lady's bag. Service animals are everywhere and some of the emotional support ones can be less trained than their handicap counterparts. It isn't till like a few minutes later that the smell finally hits her. It wasn't dog poop. Apparently this happens every so often. Someone waiting in line just can't hold it but doesn't want to lose their spot, so they drop trousers and go. This person somehow managed to get away with it without anybody seeing. My father worked as ground crew at a large airport in the 90s. Sometimes, he would have to take my brother and I to work with him, and on a very rare occasion, we were in one of the vehicles out on the tarmac. It was an older station wagon. Dad had left to do some work on the tarmac, and explicitly told my brother and I not to touch anything in the car. So of course, my brother, being the antsy pants he was, at some point decides he wants to roll down the back window in the station wagon. He climbs into the driver's seat and starts pulling levers. If I remember correctly, the gear shifter on this vehicle was on the steering column, and of course this is what he grabs. The car starts to roll towards a fairly large airplane. I don't remember exactly what happened next, but as my dad remembers it, much of the ground crew began chasing after the car as it rolls closer and closer to this large airplane. Finally, one of the crew manages to jump into the car and stop it, just a few feet short of the plane. Not too sure of the distance, but it was pretty close. At the time, it was pretty scary, but looking back on it now, we all find it pretty hilarious. My dad tells us some stories on occasion as well. Another favorite of mine is how when he was working arrivals on the tarmac, if he saw people standing before the plane stopped moving, he'd very sharply give the stop signal to the pilots so they'd push on the brakes a little harder. Being a pilot, no passengers realize that it is illegal to taxi an airplane with a passenger standing up, and we are required to stop the plane as soon as we are aware of it. Now it depends on how cool the captain is for how much brake pressure they apply to bring the plane to a stop. I used to work at a cute little bar cafe crepe kiosk in a small airport in Vermont. I was often alone while working there, and I had all sorts of people trying to extort money from me because of whatever travel tragedy had, supposedly, occurred. One of my first nights closing up alone, this youngish looking woman came up to the kiosk bawling her eyes out about how she had her purse stolen and needed $60 for a bus ticket back home to Boston. I was so close to almost giving her some cash, but I decided against it and gave her a cup of coffee and some cinnamon rolls and said good luck. The next day I went shopping and saw her at Plato's Closet. I just laughed and kept walking. Nothing too crazy, just a good lesson learned. I've got a buddy who has done a bunch of security work, meaning he tested security of government entities. Back in the 80s he did a lot of testing of airport security. They managed to sneak guns, ammo, knives, and explosives past security and onto a plane dozens of times at dozens of airports. Airport security fail rate was 100% for his team. The sad thing was, they actually provided the airport with intelligence ahead of time that there was a high risk of a hijacking of an airplane on the day they did the test. Not a hey, some security guys are going to come through today, so let's bring our A game. But actually, hey, the FBI is called and they have reason to believe terrorists are planning an attack on our airport for Tuesday. Even with that advanced knowledge, 100% fail rate at multiple airports. Security theater is no joke. To me, that is the scariest thing that can happen at an airport, and it's happening right now every day. I work at an airport in baggage handling and doing this from a throwaway. I've seen some crazy bird strikes at airports, but one sticks out that was pretty bad. It was a 737 on final and flies through a flock of geese and they get sucked into the engines. One engine basically explodes while the other continues to operate but at reduced power. It managed to land and upon inspection the good engine should have failed as well. All the blades were chipped, some broken in half and a couple were missing. It was a miracle that plane landed. If it had been taking off, it's very possible there would have been a loss of life because there was no Hudson River nearby, just a lot of high ground and trees. I talked to some of the ops guys and they hate geese and deer because of strikes they've seen. Few weeks ago I was walking out at the end of my shift, passing through baggage claim. It's about 10:30 PM. There are about 100 people in the area I was in. I hear someone yell, "He's got my gun." Everyone froze for 2 seconds. Finally, someone started to run and we all followed suit. Being amidst a large crowd of people scrambling away from a potential shooter is the most terrifying thing I've been a part of. The reported details of what happened are murky. The official story was that a cop was arresting a guy. Guy reaches for cop's gun. Guy never successfully secures cop's gun. No danger. If that's the case, why was he yelling "He's got my gun" repeatedly? Seems reasonable to say in a stressful situation if his hand is on the gun trying to get it out. I don't work for an airport, but I was visiting Vegas and I took my laptop with me. The guy does the drug swab thing across the keyboard and yells out, "We've got a positive." I was horrified, but all the employees just started laughing. Then he handed it back and said their job is boring, so sometimes they'll frick with people. Parents both worked as flight service specialists, air traffic control, but for smaller airports. Growing up, some of the things they saw: pair of stunned planes colliding with each other at the bottom of their loop, single engine aircraft flipping head over heels and landing on its roof, flybys of CF-18s, water bombers, initial attack aircraft going on their missions, Americans on their way to Alaska. As a child, when I'd visit them at work, sometimes I'd be able to sit at an empty station and play around unplugged mics. Buttons didn't do anything, and the ones that didn't do anything dangerous. I was talking to Mike Limapapa once and literally after I was done addressing the aircraft they responded. Pure coincidence, but my dad had a good chuckle at the look of shock, terror, amazement on my face. I don't work in an airport, but when I was traveling home there was a beagle sniffing everyone as they walked by to make sure they didn't have anything illegal. Then that beagle heard someone's dog barking that just came off the plane. That was when that beagle clocked out and was all in for playtime. The police couldn't get the beagle to calm down cause he just wanted to play. I was an F-16 crew chief, so I sort of worked at an airport. I was only a guardsman, so I didn't see too many crazy things, but one of the jets dumped about 40 gallons of JP-8 jet fuel out of its rear wing onto the ground, and my friend, while he was doing a pre-flight inspection, IDKY, but my first instinct was that crap is going to ignite because the jet was on. It didn't, so it was just funny seeing my friend's pants soaked with jet fuel. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.